Um, Mahalo and welcome to another live digital conversation here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. It's kind of a late one or early morning, depending on how you look at it. It's 1:23 a.m. here in southern Nevada, northwest Las Vegas. It was another warm day, about 102 degrees, and
Ooh,
nice and toasty, as just the way we
yep.
like it. Um, and it's really nice here in Las Vegas. It wasn't as humid. 102 degrees in South Central Texas is humid and not very comfortable. But here in Vegas, it's a little toasty but good. Mr. Atearoa, how were things in your neck of the woods?
Mr. Aotearoa is doing very well today. Tua. I mean, it's a little, sad here. At the moment, just regarding internal family affairs. Been very busy. Just preparing my home to have some lots of family members come in. I think many Polynesian families can identify with this. I think in our household there's four of us, and that four over the week for preparing this funeral is gonna probably go up to 20 individuals in the home.
Hmm.
So hey, we I grew up like that. I'm just grateful that I have in-laws and a wife to help me to prepare the home to have my families come over so we can do what we need to do and send off a good family member to the next life, even though he's already there, but just the proper proceedings that we can mourn the proper way. So that's what we're going through here. Nice and chilly. It's our winter, nice cold here in Aotearoa, but everything is going well, Tua. So yep.
Malo Masi. I think it's really appropriate that you're sharing, this this cultural tie that we have to family, our social connections, our familial, and then also our religious connections and our faith, and all these things come together to make us who we are as Polynesians. And that's really going to be intertwined with a lot of the topics we're going to discuss today. We're going to start off with, I think you said, Masi, was a request from one of our viewers to
Yes,
respond
sir.
and react to some videos.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kind of give some context there, Masi, on what's the video and what's the context and kind of what we're going to be looking at here shortly.
Yes. We've had a comment from one of our viewers that asks us to react to, the previous videos. We've kind of had a segment on just explaining the Christianity versus the ancient religion of Polynesia, and from that sparked the viewer to put a question or a comment on one of our videos to react to a Palangi lady regarding the Mormonism versus kind of the Polynesian culture, belief, and some of, and maybe Christian. You can go even beyond Mormonism, but Christianity is imposed on kind of, let's say, oppressing maybe the Polynesian people and not being fully accurate and all that kind of stuff. So this is her take, and we'll be reacting to it. I don't know if there's anything else to it you think um, that I'm kind of missing that maybe we'll be kind of going into our next segment or.
No, this is great. Before we jump into it, we'll have those videos. We'll react to it. This is a couple comments here from T Style. He says, "Malo malo kautama kaupama whakamaa mai e tau kumete ke polish." Get it
Oh,
ready. Get it
get it
ready, T
ready.
Style. Mussy had some Fijian waka. He's gonna throw a
Iyo.
digital Fijian kava your way.
Well, the gifakahat, I mean, just, we're having a putu in our family tongue and style. So I'm saving this kava bag from all the way from Nandi. I don't know if you see that. Nandi
Mm.
market, abe gihe, palu pe gihe, palu pe mo family o tari aki me whaka eiki. So
Mussy,
saving that. So
Mahalo
Eh,
ko e descendant a takombau o ku tohe ni hingoa he kawa.
mahalo be. Kainga foki a tako pau mo maafu mo e tui hatakalaua mo e tu mo e tui karu poluso kwamiri be.
I kai go hinga ke hingoa he kawa. Si ke hingoa he kawa. Go siwa at the top. O
Eh,
ku asia i hingoa e a takombau ko Kumar.
Kumar. Oh, eh, Kumar.
Eh?
That's what you're saying. Eh. Se ka alu e kau fisi alu he hingoa e kau tonga kava dealer. Kai ke toi tohi e Wakanda pe koe ha. Alu e mea u whakatau o tu waki le reiki he. Kakai palangi
Ai,
mo te.
Marie, Marie. He also says, like the haircut. Yeah, it's the buzz. Kamata hoke afu. Eh? You know,
Mm,
when it gets the summertime, you need to look sharp. Hey, oh, like he says right here. Look sharp Tonga. Oh Yahweh.
eh,
Maria. I remember those t-shirts. Masi, you remember those? Like
yes.
everybody who came to Tonga, that was like the
That
t-shirt you had to
you gotta
buy.
get one. Eh, eh.
Oh, Masi, look join us. Malo Seni.
Hey, what's
Ofatu.
up, Sen? Ofatu.
All right. So we're gonna jump into it like Masi mentioned. Let's put a banner together here. Um, so we can describe what this segment is, and that's LDS Church colonization, and then we'll
Mm,
have a question mark, right? Because that's kind of like the theme we've seen, not just from the question from the viewer, but also some other podcasters and comments that we get online is, yeah, Tonga didn't get colonized, but you've been colonized through Christianity and that whole mindset. So let me see here. Let's start with this video. Let's add this one to the stage
5%.
real quick. So let's walk through this video right here and react. Let me know if you don't hear it, Mr. Aotearoa.
all
The
right,
most
let's
Mormon
go.
country on the entire planet is Tonga. Tonga is 65% Mormon, which means that by percentage of population, Tonga is actually more Mormon than Utah. People are always really surprised to hear this statistic because what is a random religion started by Joseph Smith in the 1800s doing all the way in Tonga? This happened through over 100 years of missionary work and Mormon religious colonization to Tonga.
Oh,
Here's the temple in Tonga. Here's photos of Mormon missionaries dating back for a very long time going to Tonga to try to convert the people there. Consider this video a part 2 in my series about the Mormon Church and racism. The first part you can see here was a video about the Mormon Church's racism against black people, and this video will be about the Mormon Church's religious colonization of Tonga and other islands. Now, I know from sharing this statistic in the past that the first thing that people do is they Google it, and you may see that the reality is that only 20% of Tonga is Mormon. There is a very specific and interesting reason for the difference in the numbers that the Mormon Church themselves report and the number you'll find on the Tongan census. I'm going to explain the difference between the two numbers in a bit. Trust the process. I promise I'm going to get there. Now, by comparison to Tonga, the Mormon Church says that about 2% of the United States population is Mormon, according to the church's newsroom. I also thought that this analysis was interesting by the Salt Lake Tribune. It says that Utah ranks second among the states for total population of Tongans, behind only California, but ahead of even Hawaii. So once Tongans come to the United States,
Mm,
of the ones who have come here, most of them are ending up in first California, and second, they're ending up in Utah. Utah is the center of the Mormon Church. That's where the church's headquarters are. If you're not familiar with me, I'm an ex-Mormon. I grew up in the church. I served a
I
mission.
never
I
would have
did all the
guessed.
devout Mormon things. And this channel is about sharing my experiences, talking about the history of the church, the doctrine, pop culture moments with the church. And so consider subscribing if you want to see a video from me every single week. This video specifically will be about the Mormon Church's long history of working to convert and religiously colonize Tonga and other surrounding Polynesian islands. I'll also be explaining how the church and Mormon missionaries manipulated the doctrine in the Book of Mormon to basically say that this is actually a record of where Polynesian people came from, and other ways that the church made itself more interesting and more palatable to Polynesian people.
All right. Well, there's the first
Mm.
one, Mr. Aotearoa. What are your thoughts?
Before I go into my thoughts to it, did that play? Because the sound went fine, but I didn't see the pictures or anything. Did that play fine just for
Mm.
you?
It played fine just for me. It could be, I don't know. We tried to
Okay.
upload a bunch of videos. I don't know. But yeah, so you at least heard the sound?
Yes, heard the sound. It was perfect. No issues there. To us. So, my thoughts are the manipulation. It's interesting why she's thinking that it was a manipulation and kind of where to make it interesting, because the Book of like I said, the Book of Mormon is story of where the people from Israel came over in a ship and settled the Americas. Would you say what Central America, Tua? Would you say, was that fair, or South? What's kind of the debate there?
Well, the debate is there's a lot of debate. Some people, the most
Even to the
popular positions now are Mesoamerica or the Heartland model.
or
Those
the
are the
Heartland
two most
or the
popular.
U.S. Yeah, or just say
Yes.
the Americas. I'll just say the Americas. That covers all of that. Um, so, and this is just a historic record, and like what the Polynesian, what we've kind of Polynesianized advocated is where our origins of Polynesia come from is the Americas. So there's no manipulation there because this is what we've always thought. That's Vaihi. If so there's no manipulation there. That's what I would kind of say on that regarding this sister, I would say, spiritual sister here that she's kind of going explaining this. So that's kind of my first thoughts there. I was just thinking with the LDS church coming to Tonga with some of my readings was, you know, I did. I did serve my mission in Samoa, which I think is the number one, even over the Tonga mission. Samoa is the number one mission because
Mhm.
one, it was through Samoa that kind of came down to spread the LDS faith in Halaufuli, to be exact, in Vavao. So, it was that's what makes it think. That's what I think of when she was sharing with the LDS gospel, kind of spreading through Polynesia, and I'm that's kind of
Mm.
how it started. So, to my understanding, it took a couple tries because Tonga was very strong in its Wesleyan, because Wesleyan literally saved us from uh, colonization, if you want to put it that way, kind of thing. So, the LDS religion was one of the later, very late compared to the Free Church of West, the Free Church of the Wesleyan Church, the Free Wesleyan Church of Tonga, and then I think the other broke off. Just Tonga, the Free Church of Tonga, and some other ones kind of broke off, and the LDS kind of came really late to the game, kind of thing. So it took a couple tries. So that's kind of my spilling there, Tua, regarding this lady, but no manipulation there to make the church try to make it sound interesting, because there were already of our ancestors or people who were culturally um, understanding of Tonga's history, saying Vaihi was from the Americas anyway. So that's just my take there.
Yeah. Hey, this is what we love about having conversations. She has a right for her belief and
Hmm.
her positions. The couple questions, if I was sitting next to her, is a couple things I would say. Why would the church be so interested in Polynesians? They're not the highest population, as you mentioned, right? We're less than what, 1% of the population in America today, and it was way less in Joseph Smith's time. It was probably 0%, right?
Yeah,
For the most
it was
part,
zero in
right?
America. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably.
And so to me, she's taking a current perspective of Polynesians, because now I don't want to say we're super prominent, but for the size of our people, we are pretty influential for the size of the people with, and when I say size, not physical size, just the number of people. You look at The Rock, you look at the WWE with Roman Reigns, you look at the NFL, right? You look at Tony Finau, and he's breaking into the golf. We're spreading into all these different things. So now
I was
Polynesians are kind of looking cool, but back
yes.
then we had very little to offer in bringing to the table. So it doesn't make sense to me that Joseph Smith or the LDS Church had this grand scheme like, yeah, we're going to go get the Polynesians because they have all the money and they're going to be influential 200 years from now. That really didn't make a lot of sense to me.
Hmm.
Um, that's regardless of the message, right? We're just looking from a practical perspective. And what I find interesting is she speaks about, oh, the Mormons came and colonized, but trust me, I'm another person. Let me colonize your brain and tell you what was done. And I'm like, you know what? You're basically saying that our ancestors were dumb and that they couldn't choose for themselves their religion. So, and that we haven't learned anything yet, so we have to trust her. It's a trust me, bro. Another situation. I was like, no,
It's
maybe our ancestors knew something that you don't know.
it's trust me, sis. That's the one.
Trust me,
Trust me,
sis. My
sis.
bad, my bad. I don't know. Maybe I misgendered. Maybe I need to
Oh
correct
yeah,
myself.
yeah, yeah. Who knows?
So I think it's a little bit interesting that she already has that kind of thinking, like, oh,
Mm,
she's gonna come and save us and help us. But interesting. All right. Well, we'll give her, benefit of the doubt. She has a right to her
yeah.
perspective. But let's jump into the next one, Masi, and see, because we got like a handful of these that we're gonna
Yes.
react to. Let's jump to the next one.
Not even allowing them to wear makeup,
Do it.
to me, is pretty messed up.
Hold on. Are you able to see it, Masi, or hear it? It kind of froze on my end too.
Nope. It's frozen. I don't hear anything.
I paused it. I paused it. Let me replay it.
Okay.
But not even allowing them to wear makeup, to me, is pretty messed up. But here's the Liahona dress code for girls. Hair dye is prohibited. They have to have their hair braided. They are not allowed to wear makeup, which I found to be shocking. And no fake lashes either. So, why the church is not allowing girls to wear makeup in high school at the church-owned university, that did shock me. But not even allowing them to wear makeup, to me, is pretty messed up. And even just seeing that mission statement about their purpose, which is to get the kids ready to build up the kingdom of God, I think that that's pretty dark. And I really like the idea that you're not just allowing the children to have an education, but that you're saying, here's what this education is for. We're not doing this out of the kindness of our hearts. I think that's pretty messed up. So it seems like it's a pretty religious. And I also thought it was interesting because there's no Mormon church high schools in America. This is something that only exists in this Polynesian country. So I also found that to be fascinating that the church doesn't do this type of education. The church does not operate any high schools in America. The education provided to Tongan students prepared them for life outside of Tonga, whether it was pursuing a secondary education or a job in America. And I saw this kind of rhetoric of like, we're gonna, this is gonna prepare you for life in America, several places. This was the best quote though. And while that sounds potentially positive, I think that there's a term for this and it's called brain drain.
Okay. Here are my thoughts on this.
Go ahead.
Our sister here doesn't realize, because we went to high school and elementary school in Tonga. That's not just the LDS church that has those requirements. We went to a government high school, and you're not allowed to dye your hair. You're not allowed to wear makeup. You aren't allowed to do those things. You have to braid your hair, right? Like, this is what I think is funny, is like she's injected herself with her purely American
Palangi. Yeah.
lens,
Western. Yeah. Yeah.
Western perspective, and she doesn't understand, like, she's taking a point here that, oh, it's required of the church. Oh, it's the church oppressing people. This comes back to one of the things you said, Masi. Some people haven't recovered from their trauma. It sounds like she's had a
Yeah.
traumatic experience, and so
Mm.
now everything she sees, even though it's incorrect, she goes, "Oh, they're not allowed to wear makeup. They're not allowed to have lipstick. They're not allowed to have fake lashes. They're not allowed to." It's the church oppressing them. It's like, no, no, no. This is a cultural thing. You go, whether you go to Liahona or any other high school in Tonga, those are the standard rules. But
Yeah.
she doesn't see it that way and she doesn't act that way. Now she says, oh, there's no high school in America by the church. The church offers online high school. I looked
Yeah.
at it for some of my kids. So there is
Oh,
online high
okay.
school
That's good to
that
know.
BYU offers. It's called BYU High School. And so it's like 3 grand a year or 6 grand a year, and you have classes and all these things going there. So it sounds to me like she had an agenda, or what, at least what I'm
Mm,
seeing, and
mm.
she maybe has some bitter, you know how, like, I get this too, when you don't like someone or something, it doesn't matter what they do, it's
Mm.
never going to be good enough for me when I'm angry at someone or
Yeah.
something and I choose not to forgive them. I say it doesn't matter, they could say the nicest thing to me and I'd be like, yeah, I don't like that
No, you don't mean
that
it.
guy.
I don't. You don't
Yeah,
mean it. You don't mean it.
yeah,
You're doing it because
you're
yeah, it's
oppressing me.
convenient. Yeah.
I don't know, what are your thoughts to that part of the
Oh,
video?
Dua, Dua, I wanted to like just share. She has no idea. You can interject, Dua, and tell me if this is true or not in your experience. I think out of most of the high schools, Leona is pretty lenient compared to like
Oh yeah,
Queen Salote. I was
oh yeah.
like, dude, she's saying with the no makeups. I remember Queen Salote. They've gotten a little bit better now. Queen Salote girls who go to Queen Salote College, dude, you talk about code and like even not during school, even after. If you're not wearing proper stuff, you can get reported and then you'll get disciplined at school. So like she has no idea. Out of all the schools, Leona is another school you don't get smacked at school.
Yes,
Like and this is
yes,
the thing, she needs to at least talk to somebody who's lived in Tonga, and I can just tell him, out of all the
yeah,
colleges, high schools in Tonga, Leona is probably the most lenient, very
yes, most
lenient,
liberal out of all of them.
liberal. Yes, very liberal.
They
Like,
have school dances. They have
yes,
all these things, and it's like, okay, all right.
yeah. This might hurt probably some of the Leo Hona alumni. If I had a child in Tonga, do I like Lehona's a good school and stuff. But to me, I there's a lot more like to me. I find it very more like what you say is more lean. I rather send my kids to more of a government or some other schools. I think if Leo Hona existed somewhere like in America, do something it did, that would be a good school to send. But in Tonga, I think there's a lot more things that I would. This is just my personal opinion that the government schools do better, especially with disciplining and because
Oh yeah,
I do find Leona very, very free spirited a little bit compared
you
to Tonga.
know,
That's just me. That's just me. That
no,
she and
100%.
it's so funny how she's seeing it from the Western lens and what she knows of America and Western ways that it's still so hindering. You know what I mean? But that's just
Yeah,
my that came to. I don't know if you said you had something to share.
no, the like what she doesn't understand is New Zealand is, we used to say it's like mini America, right? We would
Mm,
always be like, man, living on Liahona campus is like, I remember when the electricity goes out at Liahona, within like 2 minutes, the backup generators kick in,
mm,
right? So you could lose.
mhm.
That like I was like, dude, that was like next level. When we lived in Mua, when the power's out, you have no idea when that thing's coming back on, right? And I remember, like, getting, like, if there was a hurricane or something, it would take weeks before you get power. Everybody in the capital would be taken care of first. Liahona would have its backup generators. And us in Hahake, we'd have to
Mm,
wait until whenever they got there. And
We're the
so
last
for
ones.
her,
We're the last
yeah,
one. Nah, okay.
she has no idea that like the Liahona experience is actually very, very advanced. They have the
Mm,
best computers. They have one of the most
resources.
beautiful campuses.
Yeah.
In Tonga, it's the most beautiful campus.
Yes.
Even against BYU Hawaii, I think Liahona has a prettier
Mm,
campus than
good
BYU
point.
Hawaii in my mind. It's a very beautiful school, and she is talking about it like it's prison, right? She has no idea what it's like. Go and look at Tolo and Atele and what they do with the boarding schools there. It's like survival camp sometimes, you know. I remember I remember one of my friends was telling me was my age. He, when we first I went to Tonga High School, he went to Toloa, and his first time there, right? Because he's Form One, and they sit down to say their prayers to eat their food because they have like a big thing of manioke and like
Uh,
soup and like maybe one or two pieces of sippy, like just a bare little
yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah.
And they're closing their eyes to say prayer. And he looked around, and some of the guys put their hand on top of their food. And he was a rookie, he didn't know.
Yeah.
He just closed his eyes. He says amen, and he looks down, and his pieces of sippy are gone. His two little pieces of sippy are gone
The one that
because
gave his meal a flavor. Hey.
yeah, the one little piece of meat, and it was because that's why the guys, some of them had their hand over their food because
Uh,
they knew if they closed their eyes, because you remember, like you said, this is corporal punishment. If you keep your eyes open during the prayer, mahal ka ta'i,
mm,
right? So everyone has to
mm.
close their eyes,
Close their
and that's
eyes.
why some of the guys put their hand over their food.
That's so
So if
funny.
anyone reaches over, that they
Yeah.
can protect their food. But he was telling me after that he always put his hand over his food. But like that's the experience for a lot of these people. And here she is not realizing she's talking about Liahona and the church being oppressive when that
Ve-
is
Not
a
in Tongan
first world
standards. Yeah.
experience in a third world country called
Yeah.
Liahona High School, you know?
Yeah.
And then add to that, like we interviewed our uncle who went to school there. They had
Yeah.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I talked to some of the guys who were from the outer islands. They loved it over there because at the cafeteria they get fed breakfast,
Mm,
lunch, and dinner, and they wouldn't even get 3 meals a day at home, and here
yeah.
they are getting well taken care of. So just shows how out of touch and how she is not in her league when she's talking about the experience of the church over there.
Yeah. And that's why it would have taken a better perspective, and maybe for her to even have a better, let's just say, commentary on this, if she just reached out to a Tongan guy that's in Tonga that has basic experience on explaining the standards of how they do things in Tonga,
Yeah,
especially in the college. Because like I said, when she was talking about the women not having the makeup, that's very basic. But
dude,
like I
that's
mentioned, that's what I mentioned with the whole. It's the same thing with the whole swimming. All the girls in Tonga, they all swim with their clothes on. That's normal in Tonga. So
yeah, like the
that's
normal day clothes.
normal day clothes. Normal day clothes. And then, like I said, comparing the what the girls get in Leahona compared to Queen Salote with how they do stuff,
Oh,
it is not even close. So, like, man, yeah, come on,
I
man,
this is
come
one
on,
of my
bro.
favorite or funniest memories of Queen Salote. My last year in Tonga, we were sleeping at the high school so we could train in the
Eh,
mornings.
mm,
And I remember the first time I saw this, beginning of the season, it's my first or second day of training. We train in the morning, and then I take off my rugby shoes, and then I'm walking from the old Tonga High School field. You know how they had the tennis courts?
yeah,
Tonga
yeah,
Side Schools to the right, the
yeah.
tennis courts. So I'm coming through there and then coming to that big ovava tree right there. Right behind there is where they would cook their food,
Eh,
right? And then I seen people there in the morning before, but then this morning I actually was paying attention and I was looking over at the girl and she had like both hands, right? and she was like scooping this thing, and I was like, man, that's a big old spoon, you know. I was like, a big old spoon, and she's like, like she's like she's
Like
shoveling
shoveling
something.
some cement, some dirt and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, and she's like, "Phew, phew." And I was like, man, that must be a huge spoon. And then homegirl picks up the spoon. It's a shovel. It's and I was like, so that's the real deal, man. Like when so it's the shovel that was designated as the spoon, right? They didn't use
Man,
it for shoveling dirt, but this is the kind of like stuff we're talking about. Like the kids wake up, they have to clean, they have to get the
yeah,
food ready, they do all that stuff. If they were to do that at Liahona, she would have been like, look, the church is using child slavery, child labor.
mm,
It's multi-billion-dollar church. But then you're like, no, 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 that's actually Queen Salote. In Liahona, they have workers. They have
yes,
workers who do
full
this work.
time and good paid workers compared to other workers for other. A lot of them don't even get paid. It's voluntary. Some of
Yeah,
most of them
yeah.
actually. If I think about it,
Missionaries, right?
yo,
It's crazy. Oh Yahweh. Oh sister. Let's look at another one here. Let's see.
let's go.
Let's add this
Reading
one.
it literally made me tear up and start.
Oh Yahweh. So this one, she's talking about an essay. And we actually know this young lady. Knew her at
Mm.
BYU Hawaii. Very smart girl. She actually went to Harvard and was
BYU Hawaii or
did
BYU Provo, Tua?
BYU Provo. BYU
Okay,
Provo.
okay.
Yeah. So she was a year or two younger than me. She had an older sister there. This is Star Lotulele's cousin. They're
Ah,
related. So
mm.
yeah, very smart girl.
Mm.
But she has an interesting perspective, and this YouTuber is going to reference her here.
As I was reading it, it literally made me tear up and start to cry.
Why is it I don't believe that? I couldn't help that. I was like, did you really tear up? Did you? I don't know about that. I could be
I
wrong.
also really loved this essay. It's called To Be Young, Mormon, and Tongan. It's by a woman named Moana Uluave Hafoka. As I was reading it, it literally made me tear up and start to cry. The reason I love this essay is I feel like she did a really good job at articulating how much of a struggle it is to have these different identities, to be Mormon and also to be Tongan. Here's a passage that really stood out to me. She shares a little bit about her Tongan ancestry, and then she says, too often these stories aren't even told, and even when they are told, they are sanitized for mainstream Mormon consumption under the patriarchal white gaze, which always emphasizes the completeness of our conversions and the extermination of our cultural heritage. These are the program Sunday school responses and takeaways. They had so much faith. They feared God more than man. Families can be together forever. All of the above may be true, but what also happened? What was required for my foremothers? They had to forget their familial ties, forsake their ancestral lands, and eventually their ancestral tongue. And so as the video goes on, I'm definitely going to read more passages from this essay, but I wanted to compare what she says here with what I found in this article from LDS Living, which is from the Mormon Church.
Yeah, so she kind of references that video, but this article where it says why there are tattoos and strapless costumes at the Polynesian Cultural Center. But what are your thoughts on this? She's referencing this Tongan sister and her experience and how she
I,
teared up, Masi. How she
yeah,
teared
no,
up, as.
more like tear up, where she's like, "See, I knew it. The Polynesians are being oppressed, and look at this fellow Tongan lady is also confirming my beliefs." That's so funny. Um, the patriarchal. See, I'm trying to figure out what does Moana, our Tongan sister here, is trying to say. This patriarchal dominance. What she's trying to say in our culture is like, I don't know if she really fully understands the function of a Tongan society. There's a lot. The patriarchal is more of the of more of that like political power, and maybe more of doing the ordering or preparing, like the ulmotua. It makes me think of the ulmotua's responsibility to ulmotua is like the oldest of the male side, which they kind of in charge and kind of gathering the people. And then remember, there's the other prestigious and important role of the
Mm-hmm.
fahu, which is I would say like more esteemed, especially in the social side dua of the family, and they work in harmony as to helping the family to achieve. And and the fahu is actually more kind of esteemed and kind of recognized kind of thing. The ulmotua is like, more of the male kind of doing the work kind of thing around. And then the fahu, which is your from the sister side, if this lady or the Palangi sister doesn't know that she's the female side, the sister of the brother, and she is more of an honorary kind of thing. And then her wisdom or her suggestion or advice to events take serious consideration, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's why it's so important with these two roles, with the way the male of the ulmotua and the female of the fahu, because sometimes, maybe people don't like the way the ulmotua sometimes do things. They'll go to the fahu to kind of maybe share their concerns, and then the fahu will kind of help the ulmotua,
Mm-hmm.
maybe say, "Hey, maybe how about this?" And then things can help do it this way. And then sometimes the ulmotua can also try to, they don't try to think, but they maybe work way around. If you have a difficult fahu kind of thing, you just work and deal with it kind of thing. So they kind of work in harmony. And I don't know if our Moana sister really understood what she means as a patriarchal, because Tonga, even before Christianity, that was a thing that was always kind of being practiced. We mentioned our previous videos where Captain Cook witnessed, I believe it was the Tuitonga, when the sister came on board to the ship, and him showing respect to the sister that came up to the ship. So this is way before Palangis come over, and I feel like Moana is a little not recognizing that the church is not, with the Tongans, not always dominating. It's just different functions of how they operate even up to today. So that's kind of my thoughts there regarding that, Dua. Yeah, I don't know if you had any addition or maybe a different perspective, or
Yeah.
something that I'm
Uh,
missing.
the area I want to kind of dive into and explore a little bit more is this idea. Let me put it this way. There's an idea that somehow our ancestors were oppressed, right?
Mm,
And that oppression came through colonization slash political, military, or religious. And we didn't with who expresses a very important perspective, and that is Tonga uniquely has a role in saying we were never colonized and we chose Christianity, right?
yes.
And we have to recognize that our ancestors, I feel like it's so easy for us to look back and say, oh, our poor ancestors, they didn't know what they were doing, blah, blah, blah. You may be able to say that in other cases, but it's very difficult to say that in the Tongan case
Mm,
because Tonga maintained independence and Tonga actually adopted Christianity and even pushed Christianity throughout Polynesia and the Pacific.
that's true.
That doesn't seem to me like someone who was oppressed into it. It sounds more like someone who saw the good and said, yes, that's a good thing. I can benefit from it, and I want others to benefit from it. And I think it's downplaying the intelligence of our ancestors to just say, "Oh, they were forced to give up their tongue. They were forced to blah blah blah." And I'm like, let's give our ancestors a little more credit. They
Mm,
made a choice. They understood the advantages of what Christianity was bringing, what the Western world was bringing, and they said, "Let's try and leverage that to our benefit." Right? And if that means we need to focus a little bit more on English and focus a little bit more on education. And here's a prime example. Our sister there, Moana, she went to the highly recognized institution in America, Harvard. She went there. I mean, how oppressed can that be,
Oh, here's
right?
I just thought of a new term. Is she a privileged Tongan then, Tua? Is she a
Yes,
privileged
Tongan privilege.
Tongan privilege?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's an interesting thing. And then I'm assuming she's saying the patriarchy because the church is driven by the priesthood
Yes,
and
yeah.
and the perception that the Western world is driven by the patriarchal, structure and everything else. And
Mm,
I have an interesting. I mean, it's kind of interesting thing for me to hear that you there's the church and then there's our culture, and the church does say, and I agree with it, the dominant culture should be the gospel of Jesus Christ. But you know what that dominant culture is? Love your neighbor, serve those around you. That is in direct alignment with the Tongan cultural perspectives,
mm,
right?
mm,
Take care of
mm,
the family unit. That's what the Tongan culture really strives to do. So there there are some things that you have to shed, maybe, I don't know, but this comes back to kind of like our perspective on tattoos and certain ancient practices. If I had to choose, keep tattoos or adopt Christianity, which highly aligns with what our ancestors believed,
adopt
and
Christianity.
and I would adopt Christianity. Like, to me, that seems to fit a little bit better. Or, you know, leverage Western philosophy and structure to stay independent,
Mm.
or um, tattoos. I will take the adopt Western philosophy and government structure to maintain sovereignty. I would take those
Oh,
things,
heck yeah. It's not
you
even
know,
close.
and I think we discredit, once again. I'll come back to this theme. We discredit our ancestors by saying, "Oh yeah, they were just forced to do that." Like, our ancestors didn't have the capacity to make a choice and say, "No, we chose this path."
Mm.
And I don't know, that to me is a part that I struggle with quite a bit with that position. Any thoughts on that, Masi, or you want to go to the next video?
Yes. Well, and I was just thinking in my head, though, when you're going to what the new religion and our ancient religion, love God and no other God. Tongans were like that. You know, it was devoting to Hikudeo, and that's the God of Abraham that we go by now. So it's just, I don't know. There needs to be a little deep thought on that, on why Christianity was successful in the islands instead of saying it was such a oppressive thing. The other one I'm thinking of, to our sister here, Moana. I don't know. I don't understand. And it was another point I wanted to touch when she was saying with identity, how she find it difficult to be uh, Tongan and then a Mormon and then some other, I guess, whatever identity. I was like, what's? I'm trying to understand. To what are your thoughts? Why are
Yeah,
I guess
I
she's not the only one
actually,
because I've heard I've heard many maybe our Polynesian people. Um, maybe this is more of this generation Tua that's kind of that fourth, fifth generations of now of Polynesians maybe that haven't been back to Tonga and really understand. I don't know. What do you think, Tua? What's some of the issue here
yeah,
with
I can,
them
I can,
struggling with their identities here?
I have some actually quote unquote personal experience with this. And growing up as, like, preteen, early teen, I always had a challenge with, this is Tua, right? This is Tua. This is the gospel. And I was like, I always had, like, I don't know if it's a fear or a concern that the only way to live the gospel is to no longer be Tua. Like, Tua
Mm,
has to be sacrificed to live the gospel, because I felt like, and a lot of it was driven by my perception of, oh, people behave this way because they say they're living the gospel, and they're not really the same person as I thought I knew. But I had this weird, I don't know, it's weird, but it's a genuine concern. Like, my individuality would
mm,
be overcome by the gospel and the church. So I think that's what she's kind of saying. But what I realized is this: as I live the gospel of, which is very close to our culture, love your neighbor, do your best to do what's right, tell the truth, serve those around you, right? Commit yourself to something greater than yourself, whether it's your family, your church, your God. Like those are things that are overlapping.
Mm,
And what I recognized is there, when you live your culture, this is where it comes back, Mussy, where we talked about go back and just serve your family, go
mm,
back and connect to your family. If you do those things, because that's what the Tongan culture is all about. The Polynesian Empire was built off of family relationships. It was built upon, hey, yes, there's some short term benefit that I could get if I pursue my own interests. However, if I sacrifice my own interests to maintain the order and the structure and the relationship over
mm,
long distances or long periods of time, it's actually more benefit. It's of greater benefit to me. What I realized is as I lived the gospel, I soon realized that there really is no difference. It's the same thing,
mm.
right? It's the same thing, but we have an idea, or at least I had an idea of this is Tua, this is the gospel, and one or the other has to give way. And that's what I feel like she's saying is Tongan, the gospel, only one can be king. And I can empathize with that thinking, but I think what's not being discussed is why did our ancestors embrace the gospel so much? You can say, oh, they were forced to. It doesn't sound like it from what I've seen. What I see is our ancestors said, oh, love your family, serve your family, devote yourself to your faith to a higher being. They said, check, check, check. That's a good thing.
Mm.
That aligns with the law. And then there's also other benefits: technology, more opportunity for education. Yes, there's also some secondary benefits that come out of that, but that's where I think she's having a struggle is she's dividing those things and she is looking at her ancestors and her Tongan. It's kind of like, you know what it is? Unfortunately, she's taking, there has to be someone oppressed and there has to be an oppressor. That's the only way
Ah,
she sees it. And that's the way I used to see it before. What she needs to understand from my perspective, or at least from my perspective, is you don't always have to have an oppressor and oppressed. What you can have is overlap, common ground that you can converge on and say, yes, this is a good thing. I don't know if that answers your question, Mussy, but that's my best swing at that.
yeah, no, no, no. Good, good, Tua, because it explains your personal experience. Um, just I'm just trying to understand why is it so difficult. Like to me, and I'll just share some of my personal experience, my maybe of my evolution, I guess. For me, growing up, I knew us as a family, we were different. We were different. One, you can say because we have a full pure Palangi mom and a Tongan father living in Hahake in Mua. Already there,
Mhm.
we were different, right? So we already knew we were kind of different. So and then we knew we were different because we were LDS. There were certain things we couldn't be partake of, and we just had to figure out some funny answers of why we don't do this. And sometimes we um, get
Push
little
back.
pushback too from others saying, "Oh, don't give them the coffee or whatever," kind of that little teasing kind of stuff. So we knew we're different. So it just molded me. And then the more I've gotten older, I knew in my own personal beliefs, and this is both Tongan and LDS, that some of the LDS just doing it. It was just more of a cultural thing to of some of the LDS would do things. Most LDS families don't believe in discipline. You know, That's what I kind of noticed too. Don't believe in discipline. So we were different LDS family because one, our mother was LDS, father wasn't. So that was different. But I think even if Fade grew up in an LDS family, we would have still got disciplined anyway. Was so that's just being a honest opinion on that. So I knew we were kind of different, and even some of maybe some of the discussions, I knew I had kind of different thoughts. The older I got, just like doesn't mean that I was less LDS. It's just I just knew I have a different perspective. These are more of like the discussions and stuff. This is not the core doctrines kind of the church or anything, even though it was good to talk about them. And even being Tongan, sometimes the way you do cultural stuff. I knew it was like, dude, why do we do this? What do it? We can do it this way. We can achieve it the same results, but we can do it a different way and much more efficient way. Doesn't mean that I'm less Tongan or whatever. And like a perfect example to us, like even the way you like, for example, and this is like another thing that I've noticed with other Tongan families. A lot of Tongan families don't really discipline the daughters within their own family. But you know how we do it with my dad. Everyone was equal. The daughters got the same discipline if they didn't listen as the males. You know what I mean, to her? So I saw that, and
Equal
then that's how I knew
opportunity.
equal opportunity. A lot of Tongan families don't really do that. But we grew up, and that's another thing that I knew was different. So in and even the way we just engage and the way we do things is always been a little different. Doesn't mean that our the way we do things was lesser than doing or less tongue in doing than somebody else. No, it was just different. So to me, that's helped me to understand my identity. It's just all one thing because we're all kind of different, and everyone has different experience and how they navigate. So I think you're right, Dora, when it feels like she has to choose one of the other when it's really a mixed bag. That's what makes you you. You're different. You're supposed to be
Mhm.
different than
Pick what you
everybody else.
want.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
pick
that's
the
why
good
I
from
was always
both.
I was just interested, like, man, why is that such a thing? Because that's always a big, even here in New Zealand, your cultural identity and trying to figure out yours. Like, dude, why is it so difficult for people to figure out what their identity is? But I think it's just be you and what you are, and just try to be the best version of you. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Whatever your DNA makeup is, and your cultural, and trying to understand your cultural history, the correct history, and doing a dive of that, and you really learn it within the family, and just take that best version of it, and just be you. Don't feel like you're lesser because the majority do it this way, and you can do it another way that's unique to yourself, but still achieve the same result. That's what I'm trying to say. So
No,
that's just my opinion
100%.
there, Tua.
No, and I think that's kind of describing what I kind of was going through
Mm,
was like you're saying, I didn't have to sacrifice one for the other. I soon
mm,
realized I can live the gospel and still be myself, still have my own versions of what I think is right and wrong. And it's kind of led to, some of my not not traditional way of thinking about the gospel and what the scriptures say. And like you're saying, we also, I had a interesting experience with first understanding the term word of wisdom, because
mm.
I spent a
That's a
lot
good.
of time in
Mm,
Hoy, right? I
mm-hmm.
spent a lot of time in Hoy. I would go to the Shastong Atawataina of Sundays, the Fakafe and stuff. And I still remember we were at a funeral, and you know how much they come with the teapots, right?
Yes.
And everybody gets their cup, and then you either
Kiss their
get the
cup out. They
Milo
go. Eh, eh.
or the coffee. Yeah? And they say, hey, coffee or Milo, right?
Mm,
And I remember sitting, and it was me, Danny, Lee, and Unga, and they come to all of them. Oh, Milo, Milo, Milo. But you gotta remember, I was like living with Muffy and Sue and them.
yes. In
I
Hoy.
already, I, I already started drinking coffee over there. So, so when the guy came by and they all said Milo, it came to me and I said, "Oh, I'll take the coffee," right? And I was probably like 6, 7 years old. I said, "I'll
Mm,
take the coffee," and then you know, I can't remember who it was, but one of the older three, they're like, "Hey, what are you doing? We don't drink coffee." And I was like, "What? Oh yeah, we don't drink coffee. Oh, okay, give me the Milo." But that was
Mm,
my first time like realizing like, oh, you know, the word of wisdom
mm,
and how it was different. But that just goes to show that, like, you know, we grew up getting exposed to a lot of different ideas and
mm,
experiences, and you know, it's we have to develop, like you were saying, our own identity. You have to have a strong understanding of who you are as a person,
mm,
and then you also have to realize, if you believe in a faith, that you can pick and apply the truths as you understand them. And this is why it's important to have a relationship with God. You don't have to rely on what your neighbor tells you you need to do. You just go to God and you
mm,
work it out with God and what you should do.
mm.
um
No,
Interesting.
I got another example too of like even the Tongan, the way we do things. There's some Tongan families, like you know how you go to, you ever been to like one of those Lea Maris tua, like they do the exchanges of the
I've
groom
never
or the
been to one. I've
okay, so
never been to one.
I've been to one, and like, dude, it was so funny how this other Tongan guy, you know, we're both Tongans, and the women were asking for help to lift up some of these ngatus and stuff when we were displaying to go take it to the, you know, take it to the groom
Lay it
and
out.
stuff, lay it out and stuff. And then one of the other Tongan guys yelled up to me and says, "Hey, don't do that. That's only for the girls' job." And I was like, "What the heck? I don't see." That's his understanding of what he thinks what a Tongan guy should be doing. It's like, no, if one of the older ladies is saying to help to bring the ngatu and the, you
Get the
know, the
job
Tongan
done.
kolo and stuff, it's get the job done. See, and this is the example. You know what? And this is the thing. If you're not comfortable in who you are as a Tongan, you know, comments like that that says to other Tongan guys is like, oh, he's probably right because I don't really know. I don't know. Like, you know what I mean, Tua? If you're not comfortable in your own things, like then for you're gonna get probably be say, oh, maybe he is right. No, you're just doing it what he thinks is the right way. There's no such thing as it's only the girls who take the fala and stuff because they don't know to the real Tongan way of doing it. My thing,
I've seen
if
it,
so,
guys do it all the time.
if a to me this is how I did it. If an elder lady and a relative says to come and help and do this, you just go and do it. Tatalangofua, just like the gospel. Obedience will serve you better in life. That's the same. You see that
Yeah,
carrying over?
that
I take
parallel.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, that carries over. To me, just because of some guy says how maybe that's how his family do it. Maybe there's a lot more girls that they can come and maybe more of them can come and lift up the ngatu and stuff and help the display and decorate or whatever. Okay, that's how they do it. But I'm just saying those are examples that I think is playing with people's, like especially Polynesians, maybe who lived overseas for many generations. Comments like that will probably affect them, and they say, "Oh, makes them kind of play with their identity. It's like, I don't know what really if I'm doing is this the right way or whatever. But I'm just saying that's an example. It's like, no, that's not the right way. That's how he does it in their Tongan functions. I'm doing it because I'm just being a obedient a member of an extended family, just doing it. That's just
Yeah.
another example there. Dua.
Not 100%. 100%. Let's go. We got a couple more of these, a few more of these.
Okay.
And oh, I don't hear the sound.
Nope, I'm not
What's
hearing it
going
either.
on here? What's going on here with our system? What's going on? Yeah. Let's try another
First
video.
arrived in Tonga in 1891. They got permission to teach from the Tongan king, and it seems that progress initially
All right,
was
this is
pretty
playing.
slow moving because people found out about unsavory things to do with Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and polygamy. Essentially, they saw that the Mormon church was growing, and they decided to make it so that no more missionaries could come to Tonga. A Mormon leader actually acquired the transcript of the meeting where they passed this Passport Act, and it says that they identified teaching and practicing polygamy, teaching the people to be disobedient and disrespectful to government authorities, claiming to belong to the Church of Jesus Christ, claiming to be saints, and being rude as some of the reasons for keeping Mormon Mormons out of Tonga. I love that they just put being rude on there. I'm sure that someone will say, well, the Mormon church wasn't practicing polygamy in 1922. You would be wrong. Mormon leaders were still practicing polygamy at that point, even though they got rid of polygamy in 1890. There were Mormon prophets practicing polygamy up even till 1922 and past that. As I said, though, they got rid of this Exclusion Act pretty quickly, and so about 2 years later, Mormon missionaries started coming again.
Interesting.
What's your
Interesting.
thoughts? What's your thoughts on that, Tua?
Well, it's kind of an interesting situation there. I mean, back then there was a lot of politics going on, and I don't think she understands that
Mm,
the big driver behind that was there's the Catholic Church, there's the Wesleyan Church, and then other religions. There's the I believe our ancestors saw that, like we talked about before, religion comes with politics. And
yeah.
and so you have to take, if you let the religion get out of control, the politics kind of gets out of control. And so my perspective is a lot of that stuff was not necessarily, oh, the Mormons are bad. It was more, hey guys, the Tuitonga is with the Catholics, the Tupo the First is with the Methodists. There's already a power struggle here,
Mm,
and these guys are coming. Who knows? Does that mean America is going to get involved in our politics? I don't know. But to just say, oh, it's like, oh, they're rude, that's why we're going to kick them out. It's like, dude, do you know what some of the missionaries did that were probably worse than rude, and what these
mm,
other people were doing? So I think it's just, you know, she's looking at it with her own lens. um and she's, whatever, like I said, whatever happens there, she'll look at it in a negative lens. And people can rightfully say, maybe for you and I, we look at a positive lens because our experience is a little bit more positive. But I will say this, because it was one of our ancestors who let the church back,
yeah.
that when they let the church back, it was still illegal. And there was an issue with that. And the issue was no churches were allowed to re-enter Tonga. And for whatever reason, one of our ancestors decided we're going to let the church down. And that's why they have that
Mm,
Makafakamanatu in
ye-
Tatakamotonga,
yes, yes.
because it was one of our ancestors. And
That
that GPS Nuku'alofa, or not GPS Nuku'alofa, that GPS uh, Takamotonga that's over there, that
mm,
actually, apparently, and I didn't know this until Grandma Piwela told me, that used to be Grandpa Siausi's land.
mm.
And they traded it. That was the trade-off. They gave that to the GPS, and then the the house in Tatamotonga was given in exchange
In
for that.
exchange for that.
But
Mm,
it's our, and one of our ancestors
yeah.
that let him in. And it was technically, even though he was the what, minister of land or prime minister, it was
Yeah.
technically against the law for him to do so. But for whatever
He
reason, he
overrode it.
allowed it. He overrode it. So yeah, it can't
Interesting.
couldn't have been that bad. Could have been that rude because they were let back in. But yeah,
I got a quick
what are your thoughts?
Well, I got a quick question on that. With that timeline, did that happen before the kind of church establishment or teaching in Vava'u and Halaufuri? To my understanding, what's the timeline on that? With that thing that happened in Mu'a, allowing the church to come back, was that just for To'atapu, different from the outer islands, or what's? Help me
No, I
understand
don't
there.
know the details exactly, but I want to say the first set of missionaries came, they left, they were in Samoa, and then the first missionaries were sent from Samoa. They came through Vava'u first, and then when they were trying to come to Tongatapu,
Eh,
they weren't able to land because the government, it was illegal for them to land, and no chief would sponsor them, right? No one in
gotcha.
authority would sponsor them. So that's when they met with one of our ancestors, and he said, okay, you guys go to Tatamotonga, you land
I'll let
there,
you.
I'll deal with the king,
Yeah.
right? Because rumor has it, Tupo the First, I think, was in Ha'apai. When he comes back, he hears of it, and supposedly this is the oral, the legend, right?
Hmm.
Supposedly, he hears of it and he calls a meeting, and the prime minister who allows them in and his father both meet with Tupo the first, and then they come out of that meeting, and the missionary stayed. So whatever the discussion was, it wasn't enough to remove the missionaries. But the church gets established that one time, and then it grows to what it is now.
Okay. Okay. And we've been blessed. We've been blessed of that. Yeah, I remember stories of that. How we've been. It's been a blessing when our
Yeah,
ancestors allowing that. Okay, yo. All right. I was just curious on that. My thoughts on this lady's comments here with the polygamy. I don't know if she understood that polygamy was kind of a popular practice before Christianity came to Tonga. So I don't know if that was such an issue kind of thing. And when Christianity came, then it was, and I feel like this is some of the blessings of being a Christian nation, having one, because I think it does help with your social um, behavior. And not only that, it allows you to simplify, because I feel like that is God, Heavenly Father, God's plan. The more simplify you can be on this earth, I feel
the
like that
better.
helps you to well, it just helps you because there's so many challenges, there's so many
Hmm.
deception, there's so many you can be deceived. So the more you can simplify your life and not having chaos or drama, the more likely you're able to make better decisions in your life. That's what I'm trying to say. So this is when you have one wife, and a husband and a family, it just simplifies your life to better navigate going forward. Because at the end of the day, our purpose here is to be here on this earth, experience what we can experience here on this earth, try to live a righteous life and do what's right and choose what is right in our free willing. And because there is a life after this life. That's kind of the purpose, is to really return where we kind of were before we came on this earth. So that's just my thoughts there. Do it with the whole polygamy stuff with what she kind of shared. That's nothing. I don't think Tollins had a problem with the church's history with the polygamy, because that was there's many societies who were, other than some other Christianity nations earlier, that polygamy was a very common practice. So, and it was back in those days, it was more of, creating an heir. It was more of just having the let's just say having the resource to take care of your multiple wives, because many, it was really, you could only, and there were some people who could only marry one because they didn't have much resources. They only married one because that's all they can take care of. It was more of your wealth, because you were able to take care of, because that during those times and those eras, if you didn't have land or didn't have the ability to grow in your land crops or anything, you were gonna starve. So that was a very, let's just say in those days, that you needed some masculinity to build, grow farms, and have command other men to kind of work for you to build farms. It was very there could have been women back in those days that were missing, but there could have been women that had the influence. If you were high rank or whatever for high status, you can probably achieve that. But for most cases, it was very difficult to have that. But it was a very common practice, the polygamy in Polynesia. So that's just kind of my thoughts there with what she was trying to say. Polygamy was kind of different, and how it was a negative connotation on, I guess, Polynesia, if that what she was kind of mentioning
Yeah,
on that regarding Tonga. So that's just me, my
yeah,
thoughts there.
no, 100%. Let's go to the next one here. Let's see, we can get
The
the.
church has invested a lot into Tonga between all the missionaries, the churches, the
Can you
temples,
hear that?
the
Nope,
schools,
I'm not hearing
and
anything. Go on.
yet of the
Hmm. Let's try that again.
obviously the church has invested a lot into Tonga between all the
Can you hear
missionaries,
that?
the churches, the temples, the schools,
No, no, it's
and
still
Oh, maybe
loading
that's
from
a
what I.
sign. Maybe that's aside. There's only the last two videos, but I think we get the point here. She's
Mm,
she's I think it's interesting that she selected Tonga
I
and
know. Out of
Polynesia.
all the Polynesia, right, Tonga, eh?
Yes.
Hawaii's more
Yeah.
famous in America.
Hmm.
That's the king. But she wants to talk about Tonga.
Well, and the thing is, she might have had a better position if she picked Hawaii or somewhere that got colonized.
Yes.
But she picked the one that never got colonized, the one that freely chose Christianity, the one who, like you're mentioning, has the greatest influence of the church, and also she picked the only subgroup that has multiple stakes in foreign countries. I don't think there's any
Mm,
other group that has that level of influence on the church. I
mm,
really don't. I don't know. So I think she miscalculated by trying to say this is the most oppressed group. Look, 60%. Go and look how many states, Tongan states, are outside of Tonga. I don't think there's any other ethnic
there's
group
not. There's not.
who
Yeah.
has as many Tongan states outside of Tonga, and I don't think it's because they're oppressed. Let me put it that way.
Mm,
and
mm,
and I don't think this church that has billions and billions of dollars is so interested in holding on to the Tongans because we give them billions of dollars. I think
mm,
it's whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. You can say, yeah, they they their doctrine's incorrect, and how they say that Polynesians come from the Book of Mormon, blah blah blah. You
mm.
can say that, but you can't say, "Oh, they were doing it because they were extracting resources from these people." Like I was like, dude, we are one of the. When you look at it from a temporal sense, in many ways, we're insignificant just because of the population size. We don't contribute millions of people. We don't
Mm,
contribute billions of dollars. But however, we're one of those that are small but mighty. We
mm.
we we may not be able to give you billions of dollars, but we can build a community anywhere in the world. We can go and build a strong community anywhere in the world. And how do we know that? Because there's Tongan states and wards all over the planet in countries where Tongans are foreigners,
Yeah.
right? And this is in comparison to some ethnic groups and countries that have millions upon millions of people, and they can't even have as many stakes and wards as we have. So you
Mm.
can't say we're oppressed when we're able to do these things um, on a
We were
scale
wanting to
that,
grow.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts on that, Masi, before we go to our next topic?
My closing thoughts on that, Dua, just to add on, I think there is like some Hispanic stakes, but I always say Hispanic is, they speak in Spanish. It's not like a Tongan steak, which is it's, they have a Tongan. It's depending on the most Tongans, they always do it in Tongan and stuff. That's an indigenous. I don't know if there's a indigenous. To me, that's even rare in the LDS faith, an indigenous way
Hmm.
of how they communicate. Hispanics, they're of course they're not like British, but Hispanic is they speak in Spanish, which is language spoken in Western Europe. It's different from it's not a indigenous language culture that they're influenced in the LDS faith. And you're talking about Tonga is the only one, to from my understanding, other like indigenous from a indigenous perspective is the only one to have states outside of Tonga. And we're talking about multiple states, right? Especially California and Utah. Those are the only two that have multiple states of Tongans. And they're choosing to keep and they want to keep growing it. And that's not oppressive at all. And this is their own free will choosing it. That's kind of my thoughts there, Dua. And hopefully, she can reach out, maybe get a she better maybe create some better narrative and talking points if she kind of just reach out to just a basic Tongan that just experienced Tonga and maybe its history with Christianity and the LDS faith.
Mm. Maybe let's do this to close it out. Let's read the summary that Grok gives us.
Oh, okay.
Right? Let's See if we can share this. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Want me to read
Let's
it,
see how.
Tua, that first one,
Yeah, let's
or
see.
the
Yeah, let's read it and see how oppressed Tongans
influence?
are by the church.
All right. Influence of Tongans in the LDS Church. Membership in Tonga. High per capita membership. Tonga has the highest percentage of LDS members per capita of any nation. As of 2024, the LDS Church reports 68,609 members, representing approximately 60% of Tonga's population, estimated at 106,000 to 109,000. However, the 2011 Tongan census reported 18,554 self identified Mormons, which is 18.01%, and the 2021 census noted 19.62%, suggesting a discrepancy due to the LDS Church practice of retaining inactive members on rolls. Active membership is estimated at 20 to 30% of reported figures, or roughly 12,500 to 25,000 active members based on congregation sizes and attendance patterns. Cultural context. Tonga's Christian heritage is noted in Burley's work, stems from King George Dubois First, 1839 dedication of Tonga to Christianity, fostering a religious culture that aligns with LDS emphasis on Sabbath observance, family, and community. Burley 2023. This cultural compatibility combined
Hmm.
with LDS schools like Leahona High School has driven conversions. Number two, wards and stakes in Tonga. Congregations. As of 2024, the LDS Church reports 175 congregations in Tonga, including 139 wards and 34 branches, reflecting a robust organizational structure. Wards typically have 100 to 150 active members, suggesting active membership aligns with the lower estimates above. Stakes. Tonga has 21 stakes, with 15 on Tongatapu, 1 in Ewa, 1 in Ha'apai, and 3 in Vava'u, plus plans for 2 additional stakes. The first stake was organized in 1968, marking a shift to local leadership. Stakes like Nuku'alofa Tonga, Malapo, 2013 demonstrate ongoing growth. Significance. The high number of wards and stakes indicates strong local leadership and community engagement, with Tongans leading most church units since the 1960s. This aligns with Burley's observation of Tonga social stratification emerging from early Lapita settlements, which fostered leadership structures adaptable to LDS priesthood hierarchies. Burley 2023. Temples in Tonga. Nuku'alofa Tonga Temple, dedicated in 1983 by Gordon B. Hinckley, renovated in 2007 and rededicated by Russell M. Nilsson. This temple serves 41,000 members across Tonga and the Line Islands. Over 50% of Tonga's population toured it before its 1989 dedication, and 40,000 visited pre 2007 rededication, showing broad community impact. Neafu Tonga Temple, announced in 2019 and under construction since 2021, this second temple in Vava'u will serve 4 states, reducing travel burdens, 90-minute flight or overnight ferry to Nuku'alofa. Cultural significance. Temples are central to LDS worship, and their presence next to Leahona High School reinforces Tonga's status as a sacred hub. Burley's discussion of Nukureka's role as a cultural cradle parallels the temple's role in anchoring Tongan LDS identity. Burley
It's
2023.
doing a lot of comparison from our next topic because I was asking it some questions and the church. So it's kind of
Mm,
interesting that it's injecting here the Burley research, which is what we're going to look into the next one. Want me to read the next
nice.
ones, Masi?
No, I can keep going, Dua. I can keep going here.
Okay.
So, Tongan influence in foreign countries, diaspora membership. Tongan Latter day Saints have migrated globally, strengthening the LDS Church in countries like the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, American Samoa, and Japan. An estimated tens of thousands of Tongan ancestry members live abroad, with significant populations in Utah, second highest Tongan population in the U.S. after California. Tongan speaking units. United States Tonga has over 30 all Tongan wards and several stakes, including the Salt Lake West Tongan stake 2019 and the Orem, Utah 2nd Tongan stake 2019. The San Francisco, California East stake 1992 was the first Tongan speaking stake outside Tonga. Other countries, Tongan speaking wards and stakes exist in Australia, New Zealand, Samoa, and Japan, reflecting Tongan missionaries and migrants spreading LDS teachings. Missionary impact. Tongans serve missions at high rates, often exceeding the number of foreign missionaries in Tonga. The Tonga Outer Islands mission, created from the Tonga Nuku'alofa mission, focuses on local missionary service, enhancing Tongan influence abroad. Cultural export. Tongan cultural values, such as family centric traditions noted by Burleigh in early Lapita societies, resonate with LDS teachings, making Tongan members effective ambassadors of the faith. Burleigh 2023. Number five, or is it broader influence?
Hmm.
Educational contributions. LDS schools, particularly Leahona High School, have been pivotal since 1948, attracting non-members, 35% of students, and fostering conversions. These schools integrate gospel teachings, reinforcing Tongan LDS identity. Leadership with faith. Tongans have led stakes, missions, and schools since 1960s, with notable figures like Lord Furivai, a noble baptized in 2010. Their faith exemplified by early converts like Devita Muri Kinikini aligns with Tongan Christian legacy, Burleigh 2023. Global reach. At the 1991 centennial celebration, Russell M. Nelson blessed Tongan saints to radiate faith worldwide, a prophecy fulfilled through migration and missionary work. Challenges, discrepancies in membership data and lower activity rates. 20 to 30% suggest challenges in retention, particularly abroad, where some Tongans double affiliate with other denominations. That's like us too. It reminds me of our early childhood. We kind of go to different denominations and have different affiliation.
Yeah, different
Some
flavors, different flavors.
different flavors. Summary: Tongans wield substantial influence in the LDS Church due to their high membership. 60% of Tongans' population, though 19% self-identify. Extensive network of 175 congregations and 21 stakes, and two temples, Nuku'alofa and Neafu. Abroad, Tongan diaspora strengthened the church through Tongan-speaking units in the U.S., Australia, and beyond, driven by missionary zeal and cultural values rooted in Tongan's Lapita heritage, as Burleigh describes 2023. Their educational contributions via LDS schools and leadership since the 1960s underscore their role as a cornerstone of the Polynesian LDS identity, though retention challenges persist.
Interesting. I
Very
mean,
interesting.
it's to me when you read that whole thing and you're like, for a small group to have such an influence, are we really oppressed, or did we leverage truth and opportunity to propel our people forward into new opportunities? That's the way I see it. I mean, I think there doesn't have to be an oppressor and oppressed. I think our ancestors understood what they were doing, understood the exchange that was happening, and said, I'm still coming out net positive in joining the church and pursuing not only faith, but education and new opportunities overseas. So yeah, I don't know. Any other things to add to that?
No, I think you've hit all the mark, Dua, on that.
All right. So we're going to look at this. The next part of the
Mm,
program is we are going to look at highlights of a book, and that description by Grok was showing examples of how this guy's research on the history and the origins of Lapita, and we have our own thoughts on Lapita, right?
Mhm.
That's Lapita is the term, in our opinion, that the academics use for the first
Migration.
Polynesians. Yeah,
Yes. First
we
migrating.
refer to them as the founding fathers of Polynesia and Tonga.
Hmm.
So we're going to go over some of the highlights of this video, and I want to highlight that of this book, an article, and it says the birth of Polynesia: an archaeological journey through the kingdom of Tonga. So this gentleman lived in Tonga, spent many years there doing a lot of research,
Excavation.
and
Yep.
yeah, and just for the date, it was publicized or published in 2023. So this is
Mm.
just a couple years old. So
Mm.
this is fresh off the press, if you want to call it that, right? And so what I've done is we've parsed this out to a handful of slides for us to discuss through kind of the major points of of the findings. And
All right.
I'll go ahead and I'll read the first ones, Mushy, since you were
Yeah.
so kind to read the early ones. We'll take turns on the slide. So the
Okay.
first one says Nukuleka as the birthplace of Polynesia. Wow, controversial, right?
Mhm.
It- for everyone who comes and says that we don't bring receipts, even though we've covered multiple studies, this is one that's very fresh, very new, very comprehensive. I think if I look at how many pages it was, oh yeah. So if you see this,
Mhm.
um, his book is over 330 pages
Wow.
of research and writing, right? So this is not like, oh, a couple paragraphs. This is pretty extensive work. Um,
Quick question. Do I feel like do people reference Burley's work in other academics research to it? Because I don't know. I've only heard Burley just with his own, but not many. I'm sure he has with other maybe Polynesian Pacific study academics, but not he's not really referenced maybe many times as he should. I mean, I
I
don't
don't
know. I don't
know.
know. What's your
That's a
thoughts?
good point. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, Masi,
Okay.
directly, but yeah, I mean, we're gonna cover some of this stuff, and
Yeah. Yeah. Let the people
sometimes when
decide.
when the re
Yeah.
yeah, when the research doesn't align with certain people's perspective, they just ignore it.
Yeah.
But it says Nukuleka as the birthplace of Polynesia. Burley explicitly positions Nukuleka as the starting point of Polynesian history, emphasizing its singular importance based on archaeological data. Right?
Hmm.
You don't get more receipts than that. So, in this is a quote from the book. He says Nukuleka, a small village site on the northeast coast of Tongatapu, is the birthplace of Polynesia, the first place where Lapita people set foot to begin their remarkable journey of expansion. And we're going to cover some details as to why he takes this position. But right off the bat, on page one, he makes a very bold statement, right? And obviously, we've talked about it's the oldest Lapita sighting in Polynesia is in Nukuleka, and so he'll talk about some of those things. But right off the bat, this is a pretty bold
Bold.
statement here. You know, let's start with slide number one. So that was 8. If you want to read this one, Masi.
All right. So the earliest radiocarbon dates establish Nukureka as the first Lapita settlement. Burley argues that Nukureka is the oldest securely dated
Securely,
Lapita
yeah.
securely dated Lapita site in Polynesia, marking it as the initial point of human settlement in the region. Radiocarbon dates from Nukureka's earliest layers associated with Western style Lapita pottery confirm and occupation beginning around 2850. Was it Cal BP? Would you say?
Hmm.
Yeah. Making it the oldest securely dated site in Polynesia. Early 2023. What
Yeah.
do you think, Tua? What do you think about
Well,
that?
you know, we have these people who try and tell us, oh, the earliest activities were here and there. Well, as of 2023, it seems so far. Now, could it change? Yes. But so far, the oldest documented and dated settlement in Polynesia
Tongatapu,
is Nukuleka.
Nukudeka, Nukudeka.
Yes.
Hmm.
And so, what do you got to say about that? Besides,
Yeah.
that's pretty straightforward. There's not much to say. It's like that's like a pretty blunt data point. So far, it's the oldest.
Yes. Well, and that kind of, just even with that argument, it makes it way older than Haamoa, Fiji, Tahiti, you know, Hawaii. Like it's pretty clear cut. And to me, the only way this is only another one that's gonna be older than this to when they do like this excavation and dates, or they, what does he call it, securely dated sites, because it does take a lot of time to do this work. It's going to be another place somewhere else, and it's not going to be in the outer island. It's going to be another place within Tongatapu. That's just my
Well,
thoughts to that's just my
well,
I
no,
mean,
and
I'll be surprised if there will
yeah.
be other islands even within Tonga, but it's just like it's gonna be somewhere else within Tongatapu. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong, but it's gonna be somewhere in Tonga, in my
Well,
opinion.
I
But
mean, that goes along with some of the other articles and research that we looked at, like the mound that they found near Fuamotu, the airport
yes,
that we looked at,
one of our
where they
viewers kind
said,
of shared. Yeah.
yeah, we find out that, oh, yeah, it was like what, 700 years earlier. And then not only was it 700 years earlier than they had thought, but there was urbanization
Yes.
in
Yeah.
that. So, one of the things that's interesting about Tonga's archaeology is the more that they dig into it, things get older and older, which is not necessarily the case when we look at Ha'amoa. Remember, we looked at the archaeological work on the
Yeah.
Pulemele Mound,
Yeah.
right? We got
Yeah.
we got to distinguish the Pulemele Mound from the Lapita activity that they identified. People there try to say like, "Oh, the Pulemele Mound is like thousands of years old." No, 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 no. They found Lapita settlements that were thousands of years old, but the Pulemele Mound that they actually dated is actually in like the 12th or 13th century, which is right in the middle of the prime of the Tuitonga Empire.
That aligns with the oral history
Yes,
we know of, right? Yes.
yes. And so that's kind of a nuanced thing that happens. But I mean, if we're gonna go off of archaeological evidence, you can't tell me that you're the origin when you don't have the oldest mapping. Now, could they find older mapping there? Maybe.
Mm.
We'll wait and see, right? But
Mm.
so far, like you said, every time they dig and do archaeological work on Tongatapu, it gets older and older and older. And then we look at not only the Pulimele Mound, but we also looked at Tuimanua's original residence on Ka'u Island, and they came back and said 500 years old.
Mm.
When the oral history is trying to say, oh, the Tuimanua is so old, it existed before the Tuitonga. You can't exist before the Tuitonga if you're only 500 years old.
Mm.
So the
Interesting.
few examples that we have of archaeological work in Ha'amoa, it dates them younger and younger compared to their oral history. And then the Tongan archaeological evidence is going older and older than what people thought the oral history was saying. So interesting dynamics there.
Couple comments to what I have. Um, the oral history we know of, Ata Island. Did we have some kind of settlement there, Tua, or was that like a quick stopover and then went to Tongatapu? Do you know? Because like in details of that oral history, Tua.
I don't know the details on the duration, but I do
Yeah.
know that they found Ata first. Whether they
Yes.
stayed there for a long period of time, it's not sure. But it's shortly after landing at Ata they found Tongatapu, is what the
Okay.
oral history says.
Because yes, because I'm just only curious because if there, if I know this takes a lot of money, stuff to do these excavation. It would be
On
pretty cool.
archaeology over there.
Yes, and Atla just to if there is something because I just want to test the oral history we know of Tua to see if there were some kind of settlement. I know there were people there before, but that's much earlier. Before
Hmm.
during the whole slave trade, and then they came back to I think to
Tongatapu.
Tongatapu, and they kind of integrated there. But just some kind of studies just to see Tua if it was. I mean, the oral history does say they first stopped there, but just to see if there were settlement before they made it to Tongatapu. That'll be interesting. I think.
That
Do you
would be.
know? Do you know? I think. Are we the only ones with David Tafale saying that Ata, at the bottom? Because I know there's other academics saying that it's Ata or Atata, which is kind of where the
An island
Nuku'alofa
closer.
closer. Um, that seems to be the more dominant theory that they're having today. Are we the only ones? I haven't heard another
I'm
Tongan
not aware
person that's
of
saying that
anyone.
mm,
Yes.
they're
I
aligned to
think
that.
that's pretty singular to Tevita Fale and the oral
All right.
history that he heard from Mu'a amongst
Yeah.
the ancestors he had there.
All right. Well, we'll take that one. We'll be the lone soldier.
Yes.
Take that one because can't go wrong from people saying it from Mua. So
Yeah,
I'll
we'll
take that
carry
one
that
any
flag.
day.
We'll
We'll
carry that
carry that
flag.
flag proudly. Okay, that's all. That's what I was thinking. But
Okay.
just some comments when you were kind of going through this slide, Dua.
Sweet. We'll go to the next one. Western style lapita. And when he says Western, it's like Western Pacific. Western
Okay.
style lapita pottery links Nukuleka Pacific migration networks. The presence of distinctive lapita pottery at Nukuleka, identical to that found in Western Pacific, indicates a direct and rapid migration of lapita peoples to Tonga, positioning Nukuleka as the entry point. The pottery at Nukuleka, with its intricate dentate stamped designs, is indistinguishable
Mm,
from that found in Western Pacific, indicating a rapid movement of people and culture. So there were a couple things here that I remember reading was they found this pottery that's very similar to Western Pacific, but
hmm
they also found, which had the same material from the West Pacific, but they also found locally made lapita
mm,
pot styles. And those had a little bit more of a different design than the ones directly from West Polynesia as well. So what they're saying here is the fact that the pottery is indistinguishable from the ones from Western Polynesia, it doesn't fit the idea of from far West Polynesia and they slowly moved east, right? Because the Lapita pottery would change over long periods of time. And the fact that it's very close to West Polynesia means that they arrived. I mean, to West Pacific means that they arrived into Polynesia very quickly, which further indicates that Nukureka is a high probability of an entry point because it happened so quickly and the pottery is such a close match to the West Pacific. So that's kind of like the idea that's being expressed here.
okay. And I know this is the main idea to my understanding that they're saying this was the migration, right? From the Asia. Yeah, right? Kind of like that Asia Pacific, Papua New
Yeah,
Guinea migrating. So that's why it's from the west. When okay, because that's what they're basing it off. But my theory and also your theory too, that it's a very possibility, like we mentioned before, that the main clan, the Tangaloa clan, the Maui clan, the founding fathers, I like how you put it, founding fathers of Polynesia coming from Vaihi, and then the people gathering these potteries from other places and bringing it back. To me, that's more of the theory that kind of happened instead of this gradual migration and then coming from the west from what they're saying from Taiwan and then Papua New Guinea, all of that to
Hmm.
Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, and then to Tahiti and Easter Island and all that. So, that's the only thing I would say to it. That's kind of what I view. I know this is what they're basing it off, but I'm kind of viewing it that from Vaihi, the founding fathers came, established, and then like I'm just saying now it's like you've established where the center of where your influence is gonna go, and then it's like you're sending the whoever the Maui title and his followers out, and they're just bringing maybe wives, bringing resources, and then it's like all full on expansion. It's like a full on expansion from there. That's how I view
Yeah,
what happened.
no, 100%. And I'm relatively open to a couple things. I'm open to the idea that the Tangaloa and the Maui clan and the Taula clan were the first people on Tongatapu. I'm open to that. I'm also open to there could have been people there. Um,
Mm,
but I am more interested in ideas rather than the origins of genetic material, because to me the ideas are the important thing, right? Just like America,
mm,
you can't look at
mm,
the genetic DNA of the people of America and say,
mm.
I understand what it is to be American. No, to be American. No, it's the ideas of America that make America America. And
Correct.
so I'm more interested in, well, who brought the ideas and where did the ideas come from?
Yeah.
So whether there were people on the island or not, hey, kind of, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it's not the most important thing to me. What I'm
Mm,
interested in is who are the people that came with the knowledge to go back and forth from West Pacific? How was
mm,
that even possible? Right?
mm,
And to make such a quick movement, okay, you could say West Polynesia, or you could say Tangaloa and Maui and their people came with the knowledge and the capabilities and were traveling throughout the Pacific. And when you find something useful, you trade for it and you bring it back. And that's how I kind of lean towards that as well. I'm open to that position as well, that could have been people living on the islands. And if there were people living on the islands, then it sounds like our ancestors were colonizers. So we can't point to the Westerners and say, oh, those bunch of colonizers. No, if there were people on the islands and these new ideas and new technology came and a new religion, quote unquote, and it spread through Polynesia, it's very possible that our ancestors were, quote unquote, colonizing Polynesia, because
mm,
we see across all of Polynesia similar language, similar religion, similar social rules.
mm.
And one could say they were colonizing, just like the Europeans did. I don't know. Just a thought
I
there.
Yeah, I want to dive in that a little bit to into the us being the first, and I have some ideas here that I've just kind of thought in my own head about this. Okay, my belief, we were the first people in Tongatapu. That's my belief there, Tua. In
Hmm.
Tongatapu, we were the first, just because of the story that I've heard regarding the word motu, which with I kind of shared it before, with motu being a short word for moloki and tutu, right? And then over time it
Hmm.
became motu to say that's they've kind of conquered that. But were we the first ones in all of the Polynesia islands today? That's I wouldn't say so, because that's where we did the colonizing. I'm going to stories like Fiji, Fiji, right? The Fiji, the full word, and they've kind of taken it from the Tongan word to Fiji today. Um, Fiji is one that we've kind of, to me, my understanding, most of Fiji, there's been a lot of seemed like a Tongan colonization period that's kind of
Influence.
happened,
Yeah.
influence, and a lot of that islands there colonization happened with people who are not of the Polynesian heritage, I would say, right?
Hmm.
So that's one. Stories. It sounds like we've kind of covered it, Tua. Aotearoa with the North-South Island and some of the surrounding islands of New Zealand. Looks like we
Yeah,
did some colonizing there, right? So that's one. And then stories of Hawaii, with some people kind of being there,
Menehunes and stuff.
Menehunes, and I feel like we were doing some colonizing there. To my understanding, that's kind of where I'm going. That maybe we weren't the first in those islands, but we were more of the dominant culture in colonizing the lesser, smaller and lesser influence people. But my belief is um, Tongatapu was the we were the first ones. That's just my idea there. I
Yeah,
don't know. What do you think, Dua? What do you think about that?
yeah. I'm open to it. I think there's a high probability to that. I mean, especially, I mean, this is going to be interesting if, as more research goes in, because
Mm,
we saw that one video where that guy looked at the Ha'amonga
mm,
and he compared the weathering of limestone
mm.
per year on average. And he's like, dude,
That
there's
was
a
interesting.
chance that Ha'amonga thing is 50,000 years old, right?
Dang,
And that would
dang,
be
that's
crazy.
nuts.
I mean, and if that ends up being true, then yeah, there's a high probability that they were the first ones to come in there at that time.
Mm,
But that's just kind of it's just mind-boggling for me to even think people were on that little island that we grew up on for 50,000 years. I don't
that
know.
is
That's
crazy.
just
That
kind of
is crazy.
beyond my ability to like look back and look forward on, but that's kind of crazy. So yeah, I'm open to that possibility. Um, obviously with my perception and background, maybe a little controversial for some people to
Hmm.
hear me say this, but I don't think it's by chance that Tonga had a lot of the rituals of Israel amongst them. And I don't think it's by chance that when Christianity came, Tonga embraced it more than
Mm,
almost anyone. And actually, not just were the missionaries that expressed or pushed Christianity around Polynesia and the Pacific, but funded it. That's the one thing that blows my mind. Like,
yeah.
we funded that. Like, the London Missionary Society out of Australia, we funded the Pacific Christian program there. That's mind
Mm,
boggling to me. Up until the point that Tupou the First said, okay, tides are no longer leaving Tonga. It's going to stay here in Tonga. Make
create our
Tonga
own.
great again.
Yep. Yep.
He did that make Tonga great again kind of deal. But to
Yep.
me, it's not by chance that we remained independent,
Mm,
right? It's not by chance we have the highest conversion rate to the Latter day Saint, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, which I prescribe to as the restored gospel. These
mm.
things, I'm like, there comes a time where after one data point, after another data point, after another data point, to say this stuff's not by chance. Now, what is it? What is it geared towards, or what is it pointing to? I'm not quite sure. But what I am saying is something to be seems to be different than all the others, and that's what I am trying to say. Is that I don't know exactly what that thing that it's working towards, but it's something special, but I can't quite fully express it right now. I don't know if that makes sense
No, it
to you,
does.
Mr.
It does.
Aotearoa.
No, it does.
All right, let's go to the next slide. Is it your turn or my turn on this one?
Yes, sir. My turn. My turn. All right. Immediate agriculture adaptation support founder status. Excavations at Nukudeka revealed planting pits for crops like taro, banana, and coconut, showing that La Pita settlers established a sustainable agricultural base upon arrival, reinforcing its role as a founder colony. The presence of planting pits at Nukudeka dated to the initial occupation demonstrates that La Pita settlers brought a fully developed agricultural system. Burley, 2023, page 65. What you think about that, Dua?
Yes, this is actually very interesting. We covered an article that kind of spoke about this a little
Mm,
previously. So
the
what this is
soil,
talking about,
the soil,
yes,
yeah.
it's a farming technique where you build up the soil and then you make it like a pit in the middle, and you
Mm,
use different soil types, and then you plant your talo and all the banana and all these different things. And what it does is it actually collects water and holds it in there, and that soil structure and that farming technique actually gives it more resistance to drought, and also poor poor soils like sandy soils where the water will just go through and drain away. It holds it. And
wow.
that is a technique that they find in other islands in Polynesia. And the oldest example of that technique is found in Nukuleka,
Mm,
which is why they're saying, yeah, yeah, this is a founder colony because this is where the oldest example of this technique being used. And actually, the reason why they say this is really important, because in order to survive on some of these little atolls and these little sandy islands, is these are the techniques that helps build food security to be able to put a colony on a small island and survive. So
mm,
this is a very strong piece of evidence outside of the Lapita, where they're saying, hey, no, this is a farming technique that we find throughout Polynesia. And the oldest version, have you noticed? Oldest Lapita, the oldest tattooing kit, the oldest farming technique. Like,
technique.
there comes a point where you're like, there's the data points, and you're like, if it looks like a fish, if it swims like a fish, if it smells like a fish, well, dang
It's
on it, it
acting like
just
a
might
fish.
be a fish. You know, you can't have all these data points of it's kind of a fish. It looks like a fish. Why don't we just say it's a fish until we're
Mm,
proven otherwise? Then here are all the data points that are proving Nukuleka Tongatapu as the founding colony in Polynesia. This is very, very compelling evidence, man.
mm,
Like, what is the counters to these? It's the oldest dating for Lapita. It's the oldest example of the pit farming technique that's found throughout Polynesia. What are you going
mm.
to say against that? No, my oral history tells me, okay, we appreciate oral history, but that's what I think. It's funny. All these people say, you guys never bring receipts. Just because you don't like my receipts doesn't mean you can say I don't have receipts,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And then when we ask them what's their receipts, well, the tanga, the tui manua was so ancient that we can't find any evidence of it.
Yeah.
Okay,
At least,
like the guy
yeah.
who went fishing and say he found a shark. He's like, do you at least have a picture? You have a smartphone. Oh, I didn't feel like taking a picture. Oh, okay, all right. I've heard that before.
No, I was just thinking, or at least, have some kind of like a soil thing that say, even to suggest that you have some kind of settlement that's pretty old, to at least say something that we do have some a starting point to something, because you develop, right, because it's important to find settlement, some building of a colony to show, because you don't just start from nowhere. There's a development of
Progression.
creating, yes, progression. Or even having a different, like, even that guy. And that's why it's so important to have ruins. We always go by the ruins. That guy that has a different method, and he's an expert of the weathering we provided. He's in his opinion, he's saying this is like a 50,000-year old ruin that exists, with just be based on his way, or his method of dating, right, with the weathering pattern. So even having something like that in some of our neighboring Polynesian islands would even help. But like, everything is just coming back to Tongatapu, man. Like, that's what I was thinking too when you were talking about. I was gonna mention, we already have the human settlement. Now Burley is touching. We can't blame Burley. He's a non-partisan individual. He's just sharing what he thinks and what he's found, and he's just writing about it. Now he's saying this is the oldest type of agriculture method of introducing new soil to kind of maintain food security to grow a population, because you got to have a method of um, stable food security to grow a population. So this is the way. This is the oldest way found in Nukureka Tapu. So it's just all the data points. It's just leading towards what we've kind of expressed in our many videos in the past. Tonga being the founding place and established headquarter for the Polynesian nation. That's all I have to say on that one, Tua.
Yeah, 100%. All right. What is the next one? Rapid expansion from Nukuleka to other Polynesian islands. Burley contends that Lapita groups expanded from Nukuleka to northern Tongan islands, example Vava'u, Niuatotapu, and Samoa within a few generations,
Mm,
with Nukuleka as the origin point. Within a few generations, Lapita groups from Nukuleka had established settlements as far north as Niuatotapu and west to Samoa, a testament to their seafaring prowess. So what he's
mm,
saying is what he sees in Nukuleka within a short amount of time,
mm.
I think he estimated about 50 years. Within a short amount of time, that's just basically one generation, you're seeing settlements where they've done studies on Lapita that there's a growth and expansion. And they've dated those things, and it's like 50 years after the
Uh,
Nuhureka. So, and that comes in with the scaling capabilities, right? Where now you're expanding, and
yep.
that means you have the right canoes. That means you have the navigation technology. That means you have the food security and the structure back on Tonga to facilitate such migrations. So you're seeing it very, very early, thousands of years ago, right?
Mm,
Thousands of years ago, from the moment they landed, 50 years later, they're progressing to other islands, including Samoa.
mm.
What do we
Interesting.
got to say? What do we got to say about that, Mussy? What
Yep.
receipts? Apparently, people need more receipts. Can you
And
bring any more receipts, Mussy?
well, that's why we keep doing it. We're just gonna keep going. If they choose not to be blind, we can't blame them. They that's their own conscious decision. you know, you know. Um, but I'm thinking through it like this, like what you mentioned, this expense. I feel like what this gentleman is saying in his research, saying seems like this the experiment happened in the headquarter. When they're in the lab, they're saying, okay, we're able to have this agriculture. It's working here. We're gonna take this knowledge and we're gonna spread it. And then now they've gone to the northern islands of the modern Polynesian islands in Tonga, the modern kingdom of Tonga, now to Wava'u, Tapu. Now they're heading into to Ha'amoa to, let's just say, when your experiment is successful, they're taking this technology and implementing to these other islands. So this is kind of like what Burley is suggesting, kind of the starting of the whole
The spread.
migration, the
Yep,
spread. So
100%.
mm,
And I mean, and so far, it seems to make sense, right?
yeah,
He says, oldest Lapita, you have the oldest pit farming. And then when you go test other Lapita sites north in Vava'u, the Niwas, and in Samoa, those are about 50 years after
after.
the first landing in Nukuleka. So he's like, oh man, these guys moved pretty quick.
Mm,
I mean, it seems to make sense,
yeah.
apart from his statements and stuff, but it seems to make sense.
All right, this is me here.
Oh, yeah.
What was
This
that,
one
Tua?
I may have forgotten to update the title here, but we may have missed the title. Let me
Okay,
let me see what it was supposed to say. Um,
if you find it, just read that, then I'll go ahead with that yellow words there. No stuff.
yes. Oh, it's supposed. Oh yeah, this is the same one. What was it supposed to say before? No, that seems to be right. Maybe I don't know. Yeah, just read it again. Yeah.
Okay. Rapid expansion from Nuku'alofa to other Polynesian islands. Burley contends that Lapita groups expanded from Nuku'alofa to northern Tongan Islands, Vava'u, Niutotapu, and Samoa within a few generations, with Nuku'alofa as the origin point. Within a few generations, Lapita groups from Nuku'alofa had established settlements as far north as Niutotapu and west to Samoa, a testament to their seafaring prowess. The Lapita site at Ofu in Vava'u, with pottery nearly identical to Nuku'alofa's, is dated to within 50 years of founder colony, indicating near instantaneous. Is that correct? I'm saying that correctly. Expa-
Instantaneous.
Instantaneous expansion. Just kind of
Yeah.
like what you mentioned before, Tua.
Yeah. I may have duplicated that slide. I apologize. Maybe I didn't realize one was a double point there, but yeah, same point, right? They're moving very quickly and they can trace that through the Lapita potteries age and expansion and the sites.
Can
This
thank
one,
Maui for that one.
genomic. Yeah, read this one out, Masi.
Genomic cultural continuity from Nuku'alofa. Burley cites genomic studies and archaeological evidence to argue that Nuku'alofa's population seeded Polynesian ancestry and culture across the region, supporting its foundational role. Genomic studies align with archaeological evidence showing a bottleneck population at Nuku'alofa that seeded Polynesian ancestry across the region. Burley, 2023, page 112.
Yeah. So basically, they're saying that they also have genome studies, genetic studies, right,
Mm.
and cultural continuity that shows a start from Nukuleka and spreading north.
How are they testing that to like how are you testing that genome? But can you explain to me like in maybe what your thoughts on how are they studying that genomic study? Like how are they testing
Can
that?
you
Are they
see
testing that?
this? Can you see
Yeah.
this? So
No,
genome study.
I'm not seeing it.
Let me go back here. Where are we?
Like are they studying
Uh,
like maybe when they, like some of the places where they I don't know, use the like their waste management or something and there's still stuff that's kind of mixed with the soil or how is that done? That's what I'm interested in.
yes. So here it says a genomic study is a scientific investigation that analyzes the complete set of DNA, the genome, within an organism or population to understand genetic variation, inheritance, and their roles in traits, diseases, and evolutionary history. In the context of David V. Burley's The Birth of Polynesia, an archaeological journey through the kingdom of Tonga, genomic studies are used to trace the ancestry and migration patterns of the Pita peoples, supporting the argument that Nukuleka in Tonga was a founding colony. So, in one of the studies we looked at previously, they actually looked at some people who were buried,
Oh, okay.
some burials, and they
So
took
these
those genetic material.
okay, so this is grave sites in Nukureka Tua.
Yes, that
Okay.
Nukuleka
Okay.
area,
I wasn't sure. I
and
wasn't sure.
they took the DNA from that, and I don't know if they found DNA in the other settlements, but it
Mm,
sounds like it, and they made comparisons. So it says the key aspects of genomic studies. A genome is an organism's entire DNA sequence, including genes and non-coding regions. Genomic studies use techniques like DNA sequencing to analyze this sequence. Methods: whole genome sequencing, reading the entire DNA sequence to identify variations; targeted sequencing, focusing on specific genes or regions like mitochondrial DNA or Y chromosome markers, often used in population studies; genotyping, examining specific genetic markers, example, single nucleotide polymorphisms or NSPs to compare individuals or groups; application, Population genetics, tracing ancestry, migration, and admixture. Example, how Lapita people spread across Polynesia. Evolutionary biology, understanding genetic adaptations or relationships between species. Medical research, identifying genes linked to disease or traits. Techniques, common tools include next generation sequencing, polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and bioinformatics to process large data sets.
Relevance. Want me to read that one, Tua?
Relevance. Yeah, read this one.
Relevance to Burley's argument. Burley cites. So it seems like, Tua, what we're reading here, it seems very the AI is just referencing a lot of Burley seems to be using this kind of method of his.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Of his
yeah, because
documentation.
it,
Yeah.
it recognizes that I'm asking questions a lot about Burley to put in the presentation. So it's
Yeah.
like every question I'm asking, it's referencing it back to the Burley because it knows that's what I'm talking about.
Ah, gotcha. All right. Burley cites genomic studies to support Nuku'alofa's role as a founding colony, showing that its Lapita population was a genetic bottleneck that seeded Polynesian ancestry. He states genomic studies align with archaeological evidence showing a bottleneck population at Nuku'alofa that seeded Polynesian ancestry across the region. Burley, 2023, page 112. These studies likely analyze ancient DNA from Lapita era remains or modern Polynesian populations, identifying shared genetic markers that trace back to Tonga, 2900 to 2850, 1950 to 900 BC. For example, how do you say it?
Mitochondrial.
Michael mitochondrial, excuse me, DNA or autosomal DNA comparisons can reveal common ancestry linking Tongan settlers to later Polynesians in Samoa, Hawaii, and beyond.
Yeah, read this too. Example. Yeah.
Yes. Example in Polynesian context, genomic studies of Polynesians often focus on Austronesian ancestry, linking Lapita people to Taiwan or Southeast Asia via genetic markers, bottleneck effects, low genetic diversity in early Nuku'alofa settlers, indicating a small founding population, admixture, evidence of minimal mixing with other groups during rapid expansion, as Burley notes for sites like Ofu in Wava'u, Burley 2023, page 94. In summary, genomic studies provide a molecular lens to complement Burley's, where did I leave off? To complement
Right
Burley's,
here.
yeah, archaeological evidence confirming Nuku'alofa's genetic legacy and Polynesian origins. If you want details on specific genomic techniques or studies, Burley references, let me know. All right, so it's saying to like some of its markers, they're finding it the same from specifically Nuku'alofa to Southeast Asia, and that's why they're kind of going there. Or help me
No, what
understand that.
what what they're saying is when they studied the DNA markers of the population in Nuku'alofa,
Eh?
there was very little biodiversity. And then as they found the
Mm,
population spreading out from Tonga, that it got more diversified. This is the same thing like language. Remember when we looked
eh,
at the language trees? The
eh.
Tongic language didn't have a lot of diversity. That's why they say it stayed older to the prototype language. But the
Mm,
Samoic ones, they were grouped together because they went through the most amount of change. And so
mm,
they're using that bottleneck of DNA to say, oh, they must have originated from Nuku'alofa because there's the least amount of diversity in Nuku'alofa. I mean, that's the founding colony that was very small. But as they spread out, they may have been intermixing with other people as they were spreading
e-
out, adding more biodiversity.
interesting. So I this is bringing up a question here, Toa. So, when they did the whole DNA, are they using the DNA from Burley's research to connect to the Southeast Asia and Taiwan? And they're saying where that that's where that connection is happening for the origin, or because it seems like Burley's saying that this is just a new thing that was small group of people that seemed to start in Nukureka and then the expanding that way. Is that I don't know.
Yes.
Help me understand. Help me understand
He's
that concept.
he's he's looking. That's one way you could use the DNA testing is to get the origins from the West. But it doesn't look like that's what he did. What he did was he looked at the DNA of the people they found in Nukureka,
Eh,
right, and then compared it with the people they were finding in other sites, and he was like, the
it's
biodiversity in Nukuleka was much smaller compared
mm,
to the people in Samoa and in Vava'u, which shows that the population is growing in those areas, but it starts. That's why he uses the word seed because it starts
mm,
small. It was a small group, and then they expand as they're going out as the population grows, and possibly by intermixing or just by the growth of the population, the diversity increases from there, and that's why he's saying this is the same thing like the language. And also we were talking about where they said um in Samoa they kind of tied to Eastern Polynesian, a lot of it
mm,
coming from Samoa.
mm.
Well, yes, we were talking about that. See, this kind of proves our conversation we had previously, where that shows that they're coming from Samoa. But what's even a more dense or smaller diversity than Samoa is going back to Tonga. So it just shows it goes from Tonga, Vava'u, Samoa, Eastern Polynesia.
Mm, mm. Interesting, man. This is Burley, man. This is a really great work he's done publishing some of all of his work here.
Here's the interesting question here, Masi.
All right,
If
I'll read
so,
it.
what? Yeah, go ahead and read it.
Non, this is from Nonsky. If so, what they keep bringing Tapu Tapu Atea as a place of centralization for Polynesia. To me, the Tonga Empire had some type of influence on this place. What's your thoughts, Tua, for Nonsky's question here?
Yeah, I mean, hey, Nonsky, that's a fair point. We've had this conversation. It is not controversial to say Eastern Polynesia was the youngest place
Yeah.
to be colonized. Like that's or spread of Polynesian. So let's keep that in the context, right?
Mm.
And then the other part is in the Tongan Empire, and I believe it was was it Momo who was Tuitatui's father? I think it was Momo.
Momo. Yeah.
Yes, he's the one that instituted you don't have to come to Tongatapu every year for the Polo Polo and the Inasi. They don't have to
Mm.
come twice a year.
Yeah.
Because he saw it as it's too burdensome and it's dangerous, right, to
Yeah.
do those
Yeah.
long trips. So he instituted in certain areas they didn't have to come to Tongatapu. They just had a representative of the Tuitonga in those areas,
Mm.
and that's where those areas could come and give their polo polo and their inasi twice a year. And it sounds like Tapu Tapu Atea kind of fits that
For that
mold
region, Iyo,
for that
Marquesas,
region.
Rapa Nui, Iyo. Yeah.
Yeah, that they would all go to Tapu Tapu Atea twice a year to pay their polo polo and their inasi to someone that Tuitonga had authorized to represent him, and that became the ritual there. So that's kind of my perspective on it. I don't know if you have any other thoughts to that, Masi.
Yeah, no, I think the big one you kind of stated earlier, Tua. Um, we all know as Eastern Polynesian, it's very young, and then Burley's Point just proves it. It's many years much younger compared to the the archaeological studies in in Tonga. So that proves a point. And like what you said with the region tour of being established as a place, I think I'll throw Hawaii to include there as coming to Tapu Tapu Atea, giving their offerings
Mm.
for the Tu'i Tonga, and that was why Tapu Tapu Atea was important. But it can't be the centralization for Polynesia because it
Too
was
young.
way too young. It's like not even close. If that would have had a better argument if there is some kind of work and dates to say that they were one of the founders and older Polynesian islands in of Polynesian settlement, but
Yeah.
nothing is indicated to that.
And another thing that's interesting, and we've discussed this and mentioned this a couple times before, Mussy, when we look at the ruins in Tahiti, they're very similar to the ruins that are tied to Tongans in Uvea,
More, yeah,
Futuna, and in Ha'amoa. It's the
yeah,
stacked rocks, right?
yes,
And these maraes that are seem to be built for not just a fortress but also for ceremonial.
mm. Well,
So there's also those connections as well.
and I was thinking too, that took a lot of work, but remember that fits the narrative of temporary settlements of Tuitongas when they would travel around the Polynesian nation and empire. And when you're a temporary, you're gonna go back sometime to your home in Tongatapu, but when you're temporary residents at other your Polynesian kingdom or influence, those are the fastest way to create a ruin to practice, like you said. There were the Tuitonga's main responsibility was the gatekeeper of the ancient religion to do
Hmm.
their practice wherever they were at, and then establish like what you mentioned, a place where where harvests and the fruits were gathered to represent their polo polo or inasi to the Tuitonga. So yeah,
Yeah,
to me
yeah,
that's
that's
to me that's the kind of ruins that your residency there that you need to build quickly because you're gonna be moving to other places not long after.
100%,
Mm.
100%. Hopefully that's helpful to you, Nonsky.
Yeah, Malonaski.
Yeah, let's. So that covers the genome there. I think we got one more slide,
All
and it
right.
says cultural foundations for Polynesian. What is this word? Let me open it up. I can't tell what that word is because it's covered by our logo here.
Logo.
Um, let's
So,
do this.
skull.
Oh
Complexity.
no, let me see if I can get the logo here. Where is it? Where is it at? Ah, right there. Social.
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 Okay.
Cultural foundations for Polynesian social complexity. Nukuleka's early innovations in boat building and voyaging laid the groundwork for Polynesian social stratification, further evidencing its role as a cultural cradle. The seeds of Polynesian social stratification were sown at Nukuleka, where boat building and voyaging fostered leadership and status.
My
Interesting. So
God.
he's saying he found evidence of boat building and voyaging in Nukuleka
Wow.
900 BC, right? If we go
Mm.
back to here, what he's saying is, where is that one that had, where were we reading where it said that 900 BC?
That was in the Gronk.
There's this Grok where he
Grok.
converts the date. He converts the date. Yeah. So here. So just to bring it back so people can see it, so they know we're not making it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
That this 200 and 900 to 250 cal BP is 950 to 900 BC. That's pretty dang old. And if that's Tangaloa, maybe that's about when Tangaloa shows up. And then what? About 500 years later, the Tuitonga gets installed. So
Ooh.
maybe this is the best date we have for
After the
Tangaloa's arrival.
Tangaloa to Tonga. That's been a question. I think our past episodes from other viewers were giving like,
Some people have
how
asked.
long?
Yeah,
Yes, how long was the Tangaloa before the Tuitonga? So at least we got something. That's pretty good, Tua. That's pretty amazing
yeah.
that we can at least
And
put
and
at
and
least
the
a
fact,
timeline on that.
yeah, and at least and the fact that Burley says he found boat building
Mm.
capabilities and voyaging, that's pretty dang early. Where else can we find anywhere in Polynesia that they discovered boat building and voyaging capabilities almost 1,000 years before Christ was born? That's pretty. I mean, once
The
again, I know you heard me
Tuipulotu
say it many
somewhere.
times, Masi. What kind of receipts do you need, man? Maybe you just don't like the receipts that we're bringing. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, when you put the dates like that, it leaves you no room for any other theories of like a previous empire, like before the the previous empire, like the Tui Pulotu and the Tui Manu. Like that just squashes all of that because it's literally like
So
Tangaloa the founder and then Tangaloa to the Tui Tonga with those dates. There's no room for
yeah,
other
and then
theories.
it also kind of says like Tangaloa couldn't have been living in Samoa because he sounds like he was in Tonga of 900
Mm,
BC. And
mm,
then when we look at the ruins for the Tu'imanua, 500 years old, and then we have stuff here of boat building and
mm,
voyaging that's
mm.
dated back to almost 1,000 years before Christ. So that's what 3,000 years ago, which is interesting because Tevita Fale has always used that number,
Wow.
that the Tongan civilization is in his mind about 3,000 years old.
Mm. Yeah, because I know he's always kind of said with the dates that just provided, he thinks it was much older. Tonga was much older than that, especially with the Ha'amonga. Because I remember asking him, it's like, what do you think? Do you think the Ha'amonga is when it first came out with its date and they're doing the carbon dating and stuff? He's like, well, it is what it is. But from my understanding, it from the oral history he knows, it's older than that. So man, that's pretty crazy.
Mm. Well, with that being said, Mr. Aotearoa, I mean, any closing thoughts on that?
No, nothing in particular. It's just another evidence that we're gonna keep on going and sharing uh, our ideas here from the Polynesian Eyes podcast on the live digital cover session. It Burley's proving our point. The starting port was in Tongatapu. This is where everything started. The idea looks the experiment with the soil and agriculture, right? And then expanding to the rest, and it was like full on expansion because it actually evolved rapidly to the other islands with the mixing with other people, or even bringing. I have the idea that we're bringing people from all parts of, dude, who knows? All the way from Japan, all over Pacific,
Who knows?
wherever they can reach, wherever they can
Yeah.
reach, they're bringing different kind of people, wives, everything, and bringing them to assimilate, assimilate to the Polynesian nation or the Polynesian
Hmm.
empire of the Tangaloa Tuitonga empire of those days, and then the remnants of that empire lives on to the current Tupo family that's has connection from the Tangaloa to the Tuitonga, that we're very happy that it has survived, and Polynesia can be proud of that. We'll keep pushing that until we are proven wrong, and then we will say that we are wrong. But other than that, we'll keep pushing this idea until it gets debunked. But you know we love everybody. I appreciate the viewers always. Man, our viewers are pretty awesome too, always giving us
100%.
suggestions. suggestions of content that we can react to. Always appreciate, because one, we don't have to look for content. Our viewers are just awesome, giving us suggestions to react to other content out there. So, ofatu, everyone. Until the next one. That's all for me. Malo.
Yes, my closing thoughts are this: to tie the sister that we had that talked about how the LDS Church has colonized us and
Ooh.
has extracted resources. And then we look at this study that says the Tongan Polynesian civilization is 3,000 years old.
Oof.
Please, let's give our ancestors some respect and say they didn't build a civilization that started 3,000 years ago that's still running today,
Mm,
that they didn't have the foresight, that they didn't have the mental capacity, that they didn't have the spiritual capacity, that they didn't have the political capacity to endure colonization and to
mm,
choose the religion freely. And if you are religious and you believe God loves all his children and talks to all his children, then I'm pretty dang sure that our ancestors and our civilization that existed for 3,000 years, there had to be a time God was talking to them. I think you and I agree, Masi, that God was talking to them from the very beginning. But
yeah.
let's give the benefit of the doubt, and let's just say they did it from the beginning. But for 3,000 years, you telling me God wouldn't talk to them? I believe God would have spoken to them, and I believe God led them out there. There's a reason why the Polynesian Empire has existed. There's a reason why the Polynesian Empire's capital survived colonization. There's a reason why the Polynesian Empire embraced Christianity, because it saw the similarities. Let's once again, let's not throw our ancestors under the bus and think we were better than them. Let's
Mm,
appreciate them. Let's show them the courtesy of us following their examples and thinking for ourselves and doing what you said earlier, Masi. Pick what you think is good and adopt it to your life. Adapt,
mm,
build upon what they gave you, and that's a way that you can show your ancestors how you are being the best Tongan, Samoan, Fijian, Tahitian,
mm.
Tuvalu, Futunan, whatever you want to be. That's how you can show, and it comes back to what we've mentioned before. This is why it's so important to go and serve your family, whether it's your
Yeah.
nuclear family, your extended family. That is what our ancestors did for thousands and thousands of years. And let's not be afraid to stand our ground and say, no, I'm not going to, neglect my family. No, I'm not going to neglect my faith just
Mm,
because the person who failed to colonize our people is coming again with a new strategy to colonize us by saying, decolonize yourself. No, thank you. We're going to continue to do what our ancestors did.
yeah.
I can't say it any more than what you said, Masi. I feel so blessed to have the viewers and the listeners that we have because of for the exact reason that you said. They're
Mm,
engaging. They
yeah.
share content. They give us ideas. Sometimes we disagree and we
Yeah.
go back and forth on the points, but that's fine. We don't think that like in order for you to enjoy our content, you have to agree with everything we say. We
Yeah.
just want to be
Yep.
able to stimulate you and give you ideas, give you different perspectives.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll look at the same data and disagree with us, and that's fine.
Yep.
Sometimes we'll look at the same data and agree. But what we do want to do is, like we always say at the end of every show, right? Stay curious and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. And until next time, peace.
Peace.